Welcome to the College Basketball Bracket Science Podcast, your encyclopedia for the college basketball season, and happy Valentine's Day to all the college basketball lovers out there. We got a Bracketology episode today. It's a holiday. Let's do a Bracketology episode talking seed lines 1 through 16, and of course the Bubble Watch will do the entire field of 68. If you're new here, checking into college basketball after the Super Bowl, football season's over, you're ready to move on and get prepared for March Madness, you are in the right place. We're going to talk about the entire field. We'll talk about the bubble, which is just getting closer and closer by the second. Bubble teams are not doing too well. Bubble teams are losing. A couple picked up some big wins, but bubble teams are continuing to lose. One of the worst bubbles I think we've seen in a really long time, so we'll talk about that. Then, of course, we are also going to preview this incredible weekend of basketball. Saturday and Sunday are both loaded. We get number 1 versus number 2 this weekend. Not just the top 2 teams in the country. It's also one of the biggest rivalry in college sports. We're going to talk about that. We'll talk about all the huge matchups this weekend after getting into the bracketology, and of course we'll provide some of those the opening betting lines for those matchups this weekend via KenPom. Be sure to like and subscribe below. Hit the post notifications so you are up to date while trying to fill out your bracket. Follow us on social media at Bracket Science with 2 S's. So before we dive into the bracketology, let's talk about how maybe some of the seed lines and Bubble Watch might have changed based on some of the results from the past week. So just, a couple minutes here talking about Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday's results. Back on Monday, on Big Monday, North Carolina went to number 23 Clemson. Clemson drilled them 85-65. North Carolina's abysmal season continues. Clemson safely in the field right now. Baylor goes to number 6 Houston. Houston, one of the best defenses in the country, obviously every year. Baylor goes and shoots 57% and still loses by double digits at Houston. A lot of turnovers, obviously. Houston wins 76-65. Let's keep going. Let's go to Tuesday so we can get to some bracketology. Number 1 Auburn had no problems with Vanderbilt. Well, they had a little bit of a scare. They still ended up winning the game 82-68. Number 2 Alabama wins at Texas 103-80. Another 100-point game for Alabama and another home loss for Texas. We're going to talk about Texas pretty in-depthly here in a little bit. Number 3, Florida goes to number 22, Mississippi State, and just puts a beat down on them in the second half. Final score, 81-68. Alex Condon for Florida did get injured earlier in the game. It seems he might have missed, avoided disaster, we'll say. Looks like it's just going to be an ankle sprain, and he'll be out just a couple games. Don't bring him back too quick. Florida in good shape for a 1 seed right now. Number 5, Tennessee loses at number 15, Kentucky. Kentucky, without just about any point guard, Lamont Butler leaves with an injury again. They still win. They get the job done. 75-64. Let's keep moving through these quickly. Number 7, Purdue loses at number 20, Michigan, 75-73. What a tremendous, tremendous job Dusty May's done. Purdue fans, from what I've seen on social media, did not like the officiating in that game, and this was a huge game for, the Big Ten regular season title. Michigan gets the job done. Georgia led by 8 over Texas A&M in the at halftime. Texas A&M drills them in the second half, 69-53. Texas A&M wins. Iowa State wins at UCF. No surprise there. What was surprising, Indiana goes to number 11 Michigan State and wins 71-67. Tom Izzo, Michigan State's coach, had the opportunity to become the Big Ten leadingest coach of all time against Bob Knight's a team that he was so famous for, and Indiana goes in with, quite frankly, a horrible coach and wins at Michigan State. Let's not say horrible. That might be a little too far, because Mike Woodson put in a zone against a Michigan State team who doesn't shoot the ball very well. As simple as it sounds, it hadn't been done too much against Michigan State, and it worked. They got off to a great start. It was a great coaching move. Mike Woodson got a few things up his sleeve late in his, with only a couple games left in his Indiana career. Number 13, Arizona, who's been blazing hot, ran into a team that's even blazing hotter, whatever the word is. Kansas State takes them down 73-70. Doug McDaniel is popping off as one of the best point guards in the country. Kansas handles Colorado. Marquette handles DePaul. No surprise there. UConn goes to number 24, Creighton, and beats them 72-66. The main story, though, Liam McNeely, 38 points. And it was either 10 or 11 rebounds. I apologize, I forget. But 38 points for the freshman. Talk about a breakout game. And then the story at the end of the game, Dan Hurley looking to the crowd and saying, two rings, Baldy, to one specific fan. Dan Hurley is bald, and he said it was just comical. He brings us something new every week. It was just a crazy scene. Moving on, BYU in West Virginia West Virginia's in the tournament, but not as comfortably as you might think. Not as comfortably as they were a little bit ago. BYU picks up a huge win on the road, 73-69. UCLA loses at Illinois, 83-78. SMU takes down Pitt. My goodness, they stink. How do you go from, I watched that entire game against Ohio State at Ohio State, who's pretty good basketball team. It looks like they're going to be dancing. I saw them go hand in hand all the way and beat them at Ohio State, and since then it's just been miserable. SMU on the bubble picks up a big win, 83-63. Utah State handles Colorado State, no surprise. St. Mary's handles Santa Clara. Oregon handles Northwestern, no surprise there. Let's talk about Wednesday. The real big shocker of the day. Number 9 St. John's loses at Villanova. Kyle Neptune, maybe one of his last couple games at Villanova as well, gets the job done over Rick Pitino, 73-71, thanks to a last couple second shot and Eric Dixon just popping off in the second half. Arizona State and number 12 Texas Tech provided one of the best games of the entire season. Texas Tech wins 111-106. JT Toppin puts up 41. Incredible performance there. Arizona State, we talked about it on our Instagram. Arizona State needed a win here desperately bad, and they showed up a little bit, but Texas Tech ends up getting the job done. Ole Miss holds off South Carolina, no surprise. Missouri beats Oklahoma by 24. Oklahoma is falling off quickly after such a tremendous non-conference. Last year they had a fantastic non-conference, and then they did the same thing this year, and we're like, they can't fall off as much as they did last year, right? It's leaning that way. They're still in the tournament, but hanging on by a thread. Xavier picks up a big one at Providence. LSU loses to Arkansas. So Arkansas and Xavier, two bubble teams, take care of business. And then, just going down the line, nothing else too important. Ohio State beats Washington. VCU beats George Washington. Chattanooga beats Samford in a SoCon clash there. Those were two of the top teams in the SoCon. The most disappointing loss of the night was Wake Forest losing at home to Florida State. Wake Forest not really in a spot where you can be losing home quad 3 games, but they do. All right, so only about, talked about that for about 5 minutes. Now we are already here. Let's dive into the seed list. We're kind of going to, compare and contrast some of the resumes. Not all of them, because we'd be here for days, but we'll talk about some of them and why we have a 1 seed, for example. So we'll talk about Florida, why they're a little bit ahead of Tennessee right now. So let's dive right into it. We should mention before we dive into that, Thursday night, Maryland plays at Nebraska. It's going on right now, and Gonzaga is hosting San Francisco. So things might change ever so slightly, but not too much. It was kind of a good time to do bracketology because it's a slower day. So let's dive right into it. The 1 seeds, Auburn, Alabama. Those are your top 2 seeds. Now 3, 4, and 5 are fairly very close. 3 and 4 for sure. Florida and Duke. It's pretty much a coin flip when you're looking through their resumes. Florida is 21-3. Duke is 21-3 as well. Same records. Duke's second in the net. Florida is 4th in the net. Duke is favored by the computers, by KenPom, by Torvik, by BPI. In the quadrant system, it's pretty similar. 5-3 in quadrant 1 for both teams. Florida's 7-0 in quad 2. Duke's 4-0. Quad 2 doesn't mean too terribly much, so if you want to lean Duke, I get it. But Florida is better in the wins against bubble metric. They're 3rd compared to Duke 6th. They're better in strength of record. So if you're going off resume, I lean Florida, especially just because Florida has the best win of the entire season, winning at Auburn. They also beat Tennessee. Not saying Duke hasn't beaten good teams. They also beat Auburn, but they beat Auburn at home. Florida went to Auburn and beat them. So that's why I kind of leaned Florida over Duke. It's about as close to a coin flip as you can do. As mentioned, 5-3 in quad 1, 5-3 in quad 1. Duke favored by the computers. Florida favored by the resume metrics. So it's close. I think they're your next 2 1 seeds, though, Florida and Duke. Your first 2 seed is Tennessee. Let's talk about Tennessee because they are pretty close. Now, as we mentioned, Florida and Duke are 21-3. Tennessee's 20-5, so a little bit worse. They are 4th in wins above bubble, though, compared to Duke's 6th. And in quad 1, Tennessee is 8-5, so they've played 13 quad 1 games. Duke is 5-3, so a little bit better on on Tennessee's aspect there, but it's just the overall computer rankings that just really favor Duke in this one. But Tennessee not too far off, and Tennessee know a little bit of some recency stuff. They're losing a couple games, but still in the conversation as the first 2 seed. Houston as your next 2 seed. Houston, one of those teams that, as crazy as it sounds, hasn't picked up as many wins as they should be, and they're 6th overall in bracketology right now. They're 5-3 in quad 1, just like Florida and Duke. They're 5-1 in quad 2, so they do have one quad 2 loss. But Houston is up to, they're 3 at Ken Palm. The computers love them. They're comfortably in. They're now the favorite after Arizona's loss at Kansas State to win the Big 12. Texas A&M as your next 2 seed. We've talked a lot about Texas A&M on recent podcasts. The resume is flying completely under the radar. Their resume, quite frankly, is just spectacular. It's so much better than you would expect. They're 13th in the net, 7-5 in quad 1, 6-0 in quad 2, 5th overall in wins against bubble. So this team has put together, just kind of falling into they're fifth. They're 5th in the SEC in terms of bracketology, but they're 7th overall. That's the SEC for you this year. In your last 2 seed is Purdue. I know Purdue just lost at Michigan, but Purdue has one of the best resumes in the country. 8th in the net, 19-6 overall, 7-6 in quad 1, 7-0 in quad 2, 7th in wins against bubble. I think they're the best team in the Big Ten, quite frankly. I know there's an argument for Michigan, but Purdue has been playing as good as just about anyone over, and Braden Smith has just popped off as an All-American. He's probably going to be a first-team All-American. I would be surprised if he wasn't. Your first 3 seed is Iowa State. Iowa State starting to take care of a little bit of business. They just got a quad 1 win over UCF, either quad 1 or quad 2. I can't even remember where UCF is because they are not loved by the computers and, quite frankly, not really loved by me. I don't think they're that good either. But Iowa State, they still got a solid resume. I know they lost a few. They lost 3 games in a row, but they're still right there. Arizona, they're also still right there. 7 quad 1 wins. They are rolling until that loss at Kansas State. They ran into the hottest team in the country. They're in the top 10 in the net right now. In fact, they are 10th in the net, so they look really good. Wisconsin as your next 3 seed. Wisconsin's flying under the radar like crazy. Their resume is so good. When I said Purdue is the best team in the Big Ten, a lot of people, when you think about who's the best team in the Big Ten, it's Purdue, Michigan, or Michigan State. People don't talk about Wisconsin. Wisconsin is really good. They're 19-5, 6-5 in quad 1, 6-0 in quad 2. They're 11th in wins against bubble. This team is really good, and people just aren't really talking about him. They have one of the best players who, he's gotten some love, John Tanji. They are flying under the radar. Wisconsin has sneaky Final Four upside. I've been giving Wisconsin praise for a while on this podcast. They're a good basketball team. I know I'm going to hear it as soon as I post this on the Instagram, as soon as I'm done with this. Wisconsin is not a 3 seed. Wisconsin is not a 3 seed. Yes, they are. Go look at their resume. Their resume is so much better than you would expect. They're just flying under the radar. And your last 3 seed is Kentucky. The Kentucky Wildcats just win every just about massive game that they have, but then lose to some games where you shouldn't really lose. They're 8th in wins above bubble. They have 8 quad 1 wins, which is good for 2nd in the country, tied for 2nd in the country. They have 0 quad 2 wins, so that's why it's a little bit, not like 1 seed, 2 seed range, but still in there as a 3 seed, and they have lost a few. They are 2-4 on the road this season, so that is a metric that will be used. Your first 4 seed is Michigan, as we just talked about. They are the projected winners of the Big Ten. Their resume has really taken a boost as of late. 6-3 in quad 1, 5-2 in quad 2. Very good season. Kansas as your next 4 seed. I know people are like, Kansas stinks. They don't deserve to be a 4 seed. People love Michigan State. They beat Michigan State. People love Duke. They beat Duke. They beat Iowa State. They've still beaten good teams. I agree. They're disappointing. They are not as, they were preseason number 1. They're a 4 seed. Just kind of seems very similar to last year's team, does it not? I think they're better than last year's team. I really do. But down to a 4 seed. Texas Tech also at a 4 seed. Texas Tech 9th in the net. They are loved, and I mean loved by the computers. Also 9th at Ken Palm. They're right there in the conversation after a shaky non-con, which is kind of what's holding them back right now. But since then, have been spectacular. 6-3 in quad 1. Moving on, Marquette as your next 4 seed, the last 4 seed. They dropped to a 5 seed for us in our last bracketology, but are now back up to a 4 seed. Them and St. John's. St. John's I had as a 4 seed and dropped to a 5 seed, so those two teams flipped. I know Marquette just lost to St. John's. That was at St. John's. Marquette's going to get a chance to rebound. Marquette not playing great basketball right now. So St. John's is 22nd in the net. Marquette is 23rd in the net, so they're right there. But when you look at the rest of the metrics, St. John's is 3-4 in quad 1. Marquette is 5-4 in quad 1. Now St. John's is 6-0 in quad 2 compared to Marquette's 6-2. But Marquette's a little bit better in the wins against bubble aspect there. They're 14th compared to 15th. Still very close, but Marquette's kind of trending in the wrong direction if you ask me right now. Still a good team. Kind of screams like, they kind of scream 5 seed to me, and popular upset pick against, which I don't think will happen. I think Cam Jones can get them there. They're still a talented team, but hopefully they can start to rebound. Another team that is closer to a 4 seed than you would imagine is Ole Miss. Ole Miss is 5-6 in quad 1, so not as good as Marquette at 5-4. They're 5-0 in quad 2, which is close to Marquette. Marquette's 6-2, so 10-6 in the first 2 quadrants compared to 11-6 of Marquette in the first 2 quadrants, so it's really close. Ole Miss is right there. Ole Miss won at Alabama, so they're right in the conversation right now. They've got a great resume. Got them as a 5 seed right now. Now, you notice we haven't said Michigan State yet. That is correct. Michigan State is, I don't mean to come off negative, they're the most overrated basketball team in the country. I think they're a good basketball team. Like, don't get me wrong. I don't think they're a bad basketball team, but they are the most overrated team in the country. I've been seeing people say they should be 2 or a 3 seed. Why? What have they done to be a 2 or 3 seed? They haven't really beaten anyone. They're down at 20. They're down all the way down to 23rd at KenPom right now. They are 24th in the net. They're 5-4 in quad 1, pretty good. 4-1 in quad 2. Their strength of schedule is not very good. They're 22nd in wins against bubble. Their resume is a little bit overrated and a little bit fluctuated by that big win streak they had, but that win streak came against the weakest schedule in to start Big Ten play. They had the 18th hardest Big Ten schedule through their undefeated start there. So I think Michigan State's a little bit overrated, quite frankly. Good team, not a national championship contender, and I don't think even a Final Four contender. Like, I know that's still, like, you can make the Elite Eight and be an awesome basketball team. I don't know if I see that with this team. Next up, Illinois as your final 5 seed. Illinois, one of those teams where it's really hard to figure out their metrics because they're loved by the computers. They're 12th in the net over at KenPom. They're 15th. So, a 5 seed might seem a little bit low for them, but they're 7-7 in quad 1, which is great, but their wins against bubble is 27th. I guess I probably should mention wins against bubble basically means it's a strength of record metric where it's basically, your strength of schedule and how you should perform against your strength of schedule, and then that ranks you. So they're 27th in the country in that one. So that kind of weighs them down. I lean heavily on the wins against bubble. I think this is a great metric. Same with strength of record over at ESPN. I lean more wins against bubble because, quite frankly, ESPN metrics are a little bit janky. I know that picture went viral on social media of they pulled up a graphic that said North Carolina had like an 80% chance to make the NCAA tournament, and people went crazy, as they should. That's so far off. So, I lean a little bit more of the wins against bubble for that reason. Your first 6 seed is UCLA. UCLA kind of flying under the radar to myself right now, too. Kind of caught myself ranking them. Well, I didn't catch myself. Some other people caught myself. Maybe ranking them a little bit too low. They're 6-7 in quad 1, 4-0 in quad 2, 24th in wins above bubble. Solid resume. Not an elite resume, but very solid resume. They're a good team. They do kind of struggle. They've been struggling lately on the road. So that we'll see what they can do with that. But when they play on the West Coast, they're pretty much unbeatable. Maryland as your next 6 seed. Maryland kind of liked by the computers, 18th in the net, 5-5 in quad 1, 3-1 in quad 2. Wins against bubble is 30th, so they're 30th in the country in wins against bubble. Basically, what your record should be compared to the schedule you have faced. They're at 30th right now. Memphis just kind of tagging along. I think Memphis started as my last 4 seed, then the first 5th seed, then second 5th seed, then third 5th seed. Just because they don't have any opportunities. They've racked up a ton of huge wins in the non-con, and then there's just not really any opportunities to pick up huge wins in the American Conference. But they're still taking care of business. They're if you want to go for a mid-major to make the Final Four, I would 100% lean towards Memphis. They're a great team. Missouri as your next 6 seed. I know Missouri fans kind of want to see them a little bit higher. Missouri got a great fan base. I didn't realize how passionate Missouri's fans are. Some people want to see them a little bit higher. They're 4-6 in Quad 1, which, it's not horrible. Those are your hardest games. Only 3-0 in Quad 2, though, so 7-6 in the first 2 quadrants. 19th in wins above bubble, though, so that's pretty good. I expect to see them anywhere between the 5 and 7 range once March comes along. Your first 7 seed is Creighton. Now, Creighton and UConn are both very close in just about every category. So let's just kind of compare their resumes, because UConn is your second 7 seed. So UConn is 17-7. Creighton's 18-7. Creighton won at UConn. UConn won at Creighton. So don't worry about that too much. Creighton 5-3 in Quad 1. UConn 5-4, so a little bit of the edge to Creighton. Creighton 6-4 in Quad 2. That's kind of a lot of Quad 2 losses, but still a lot of Quad 2 wins as well. UConn is 4-2 in Quad 2. UConn does have a Quad 3 loss, which Creighton does not have. So and in the wins against bubble metric, Creighton is 26, UConn's 37th. So to me, there is kind of a clear difference there, and that's why I give it to Creighton over UConn right now. Your next 7 seed, I think they're 7 or 8 seed range. One of those teams you don't really know what to do with. You kind of just guess and pray, because I think just about everyone knows that they're not that good, but their resume is still pretty good. It is Oregon. Oregon's 7-6 in Quad 1, 3-2 in Quad 2. 7 Quad 1 wins. That's really good for a fringe 7-8 seed right now. But man, they have been struggling hard as of late. Really running into some good teams in the Big Ten, and they're not winning them. They're still 23rd in wins against bubble. Expect them, they're going to be in the tournament because they racked up so many. They won the Players Era. They won the Players Era Festival and just have not been the same since. Moving on, your next 7 seed is St. Mary's. St. Mary's is 21-4. Now, this is just kind of what you get in the WCC. Not going to pick up a ton of huge wins. They're 4-2 in Quad 1, 5-2 in Quad 2. Pretty good, but 29th in wins against bubble because their strength of schedule. Not going to be as elite as these other teams. First 8 seed, Mississippi State. Mississippi State is struggling, and I mean struggling as of late. They still have a pretty solid resume, but they have really started to fall off a little bit. Louisville as your next 8 seed. Got a lot of questions on how are they not higher. I know it seems like these 8 seeds might seem a little bit low, but there's nowhere to go. If I were to put UConn or Creighton there, you'd be saying the exact same thing. There's just really nowhere for them to go. What I will say is the 8 seeds and better have separated themselves so much from the 9 seeds, and the 9 seeds have separated themselves a lot from the 10 seeds, and the 10 seeds have separated themselves a ton from the 11 seeds, if that makes sense. So the 8 seeds are comfortably, and the 8 seeds are getting close to lock status as good as they've been doing. So Louisville as your next 8 and Clemson as your next 8. I know people don't like that. 3 Quad 1 wins, nothing spectacular. 3-2, 6-2 in Quad 2. That's pretty good. So 9-4 in the first 2 quadrants. They have a Quad 3 loss, and they're 32nd in wins against bubble. 29th in the net. Their computer metrics are, they're okay. Nothing spectacular. 27th. They scream 8 seed to me. 7 or 8 seed. I have them as an 8 right now because 7 seeds are really good too. Baylor as your next 8 seed. Baylor just kind of doing okay, haven't been great, haven't been awful. 4-8 in Quad 1, not great. They do have a Quad 3 loss. They're 33rd in wins against bubble, so they are just behind behind Clemson. But Baylor, they're still comfortably in the tournament. Moving on to the 9 seeds, a 9 seed that is just an absolute nightmare to a 1 seed if they're in your region. Gonzaga, they have no wins. They're 2-6 in Quad 1, 3-1 in Quad 2. 48th in wins against bubble, yet they're 14th in the net, and they are 11th at KenPom. Those metrics are usually pretty good at ranking, KenPom's world known. The stats, they correlate with who wins the national championship every year. There's, KenPom trends where it's take these teams. KenPom is the original, when Vegas is going to make their lines, they look at KenPom and see what the computers say. This is the main computer algorithm. And so they have Gonzaga pretty high. That would If you're Auburn and you're like, great, I would have rather have been the second number one seed if you have to draw Gonzaga and you're the number one overall seed or something like that. But Gonzaga, they're still in the tournament, but they don't have any real great wins. I think we know what they can do, but we'll see. New Mexico winning the Mountain West as your next 9 seed. Some people have been wondering why they're not higher. The resume is not all that spectacular. They're 20-4, really good. But one of those losses is a quad 3, and one of those losses is a quad 4. So those really hurt you, and they only have 2 quad 1 wins. Now they are 7-1 in quad 2, so fairly interesting resume going on there. I do think if they win the Mountain West tournament that they will end up an 8 seed, maybe a 7 seed, but got them as a 9 right now. Nebraska comfortably in, playing great basketball as of late. 5-6 in quad 1, pretty freaking good for a 9 seed right there. 3-2 in quad 2, they're 36 in wins against bubble. Good basketball team. Ohio State also comfortably in as a 9 seed, 5-7 in quad 1, pretty good for a 9 seed. 3-3 in quad 2, so 8-10 in the first 2 quadrants. That's pretty good. That's a dangerous team. They can beat just about anyone. 42nd in wins against bubble, though, which isn't too spectacular, but they are liked by the computer metrics. 26th in the net. They are 28th at KenPom, so they've got pretty good quality there. Moving on. Next, the first 10 seed. Let's talk about Utah State. Utah State, I thought for sure they were going to win the Mountain West, quite frankly, because I thought it is a bad take. I thought New Mexico was a little bit overrated. I saw a couple games early, just wasn't impressed. Maybe I caught their quad 4 loss. I don't even remember, but I thought Utah State was the better team. But New Mexico went to Utah State and quite frankly drilled them. But Utah State has really good resume metrics. They're 29th in KPI, which is just another kind of strength of record resume metric. They're 24th in strength of record over at ESPN. They're 28th in wins against bubble. So it averages out to about 27th, which is like, do the math there, 7 seed, 8 seed, something like that. But the computers don't like them as much. KenPom, BPI, Torvik, they don't like them as much. They're a little bit lower in the net, but I still have them as a first 10 seed. West Virginia with a really interesting resume going right now because they started off so strong, got into like 4-5 seed range. Since then have really been struggling. I'll just say it. I don't think they're that great of a basketball team. I think if they get in as a 10 seed, they'll be a popular pick to beat the 7 seed and then beat a 2 seed because they've shown that they can beat some good teams. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think this team is that good. Oklahoma as your next 10 seed, hanging on by a thread, by an absolute thread. Their resume is pretty good. The computers hate them because they don't hate them. They don't like them though, because they've just been struggling mightily as of late and they've been getting blown out. They won the battle for Atlantis. They had a great non-con. They're going to test the theory, I believe, of 6-12 in the SEC. Does that get you in? Or 7-11? I think probably, but it's close. Vanderbilt kind of taking care of business in they didn't have as good of a non-con as Oklahoma, but they're doing better for themselves in the SEC than Oklahoma is. Got them as the last 10 seed. And then San Diego State as the first 11 seed, just barely hanging on by, a thread. Hanging on by a thread. They picked up a escape win against San Jose State the other day. So let's switch graphics here. Let's go to the bubble graphic. So as mentioned, our last 4 buys right now. West Virginia, Oklahoma, Vanderbilt, San Diego State. San Diego State's resume is, let's just compare them to the first 4 team, because let's just go down the list and explain kind of what I'm thinking here. 4-3 in quad 1. It's pretty good for an 11 seed, especially when one of those wins is on a neutral over Houston, which is a 2 seed. They are 53rd in the net. They're 15-6 overall. They haven't played that many games, quite frankly. A lot of teams have, like Santa Clara is 17-10. They've played 27 games, and San Diego State's played 21. Anyways, they're 4-3 in quad 1, 43rd in wins against bubble. That puts you right about on the bubble. They do have a quad 3 loss, but most of the bubble teams seem to have quad 3 losses. But I think they're a little bit ahead of Georgia, who we'll talk about next, because of that 4-3 quad 1 record, 43rd in wins against bubble. Let's talk about Georgia, who I have as a first 4 team. So as mentioned, San Diego State 4-3 in quad 1. Georgia's 2-9, but the thing about Georgia is they haven't lost outside of quadrant 1. They haven't really shown they can beat the good teams. They did beat Kentucky at home, but outside of that, haven't really showed. They're 1-6 on the road. That doesn't look good. They're 40th in wins against bubble. Not so bad, but they don't really have all the wins to back that up. So I got them as a first four team. Next up, I do have Arkansas. So I have Arkansas 3 teams in. I've been seeing a lot of people have them as like the last team in or first team out. I don't agree with that. I mean, they're 3-7, 1-2 in 3-7 in quad one, 1-2 in quad two. Nothing great. Obviously, they've played a tough schedule. They're 44th in wins against bubble. Their resume aspects aren't as good as the quality, the KenPom aspects. They're 41st at KenPom, so they're just about as close to a bubble team as you can get. But as we mentioned, the bubble teams aren't very good, so this is why I kind of give them a little bit of the edge because, I mean, they won at Texas. They obviously won at Kentucky. They've kind of shown they can beat some of the better teams. I hope that the committee takes this into account, but who really knows with them. So let's compare Arkansas to BYU because it's pretty close. Arkansas 3-7 in quad one, as mentioned. BYU is 3-5. So haven't played as many games, but both 3 quad one wins. Now BYU is 3-3 in quad two compared to Arkansas's 1-2. But Arkansas has played a much, and I mean much, tougher schedule. Arkansas is 44th in wins against bubble. BYU is 49th. Other metrics, so the computers like BYU a little bit more than Arkansas. They beat teams by worse, I guess you can say. They beat teams by more. But to me, it's resume that gets you in, and then your metrics get you seeded, which is why I lean Arkansas. Arkansas's resume metrics are better than BYU's, excuse me. So I give the edge to Arkansas. Arkansas 54th in KPI, which is strength of record metric, compared to 59th for BYU, 44th in wins against bubble compared to 49th for BYU. A little bit better, so that's why I give them, like, if they were the last 2 teams of you have to pick one's in, one's out, I think you got to give it to Arkansas because their resume, to me, is better. Their wins against bubble is better. Their KPI is better. But it is about as close as you can get. Don't get me wrong. As I said, this bubble is as close as it's been all season long. Next up is Wake Forest as the last team in. Wake Forest is 67th in the net. They were comfortably in. I had them as the last team with a bye was Wake Forest. And then you lose a quad 3 game and it drops you. So 1-6 in quad one, not great. 39th in wins against bubble though, so that's pretty good. Their resume is solid. It's not bad. They don't have any bad losses outside of the Florida State one that they just lost to. But Wake Forest also are just so poorly rated by the computers that it's kind of holding them back. But like we said, resume gets you in. The seeding kind of is influenced by the computer metrics. So if they have a better resume, I think they deserve to be in, and I think they deserve to be in over Texas right now, who I have as the first team out. So remember, Wake Forest 39th wins against bubble, only 1-6 in quad one, 5-0 in quad two though. Going to Texas. Texas is liked by the computers, but their resume is not so spectacular. 3-8 in quad one. You're obviously going to get a lot more opportunities playing in the SEC, but they're 46th in wins against bubble. That was a little bit too big of a margin for me. 39th for Wake Forest, 46th for Texas. Texas also is 65th in KPI. That's not good. That is not good at all compared to Wake Forest's 46th, excuse me. Sorry, I was trying to find it. And strength of record, Wake Forest is 37th. Their wins against bubble, as mentioned, 39th compared to Texas. Strength of record is 50th. Wins against bubble, 46th. I think there's a clear gap. I think Texas is your first team out right now. SMU as your second team out right now. SMU, if you can get one quad one win, I think you're going to be in. I just don't know if I see the committee putting you in without a quad one win. The computers sort of like them, an average metric of about 40. The strength of records 39th, wins against bubble 45th. Not as good as Wake Forest, but they're also lacking that quad one win. You get one quad one win, that's going to help this quite a bit. They just do not have it yet. I think SMU is your second team out right now. Indiana as your third team out after picking up that massive win at Michigan State. So they're 3-10 in quad one. Yikes. Not great. Never want to see double-digit losses in any of the quadrants, but they do. They haven't lost outside of quadrant one, though. 47th in wins against bubble, though, and 47th in wins against bubble. They're 38th in KPI, 47th in strength of record. Not as good as Wake Forest, not as good as SMU, in my opinion. I don't think they would put Indiana in over Texas, SMU, or Wake Forest. And then VCU. So this is going to be a different one because I've had VCU as the automatic qualifier. George Mason's in first. VCU is by far the best team in the A10, in my opinion. I think VCU's going to win the A10 tournament, but anything can happen. They're loved by the computers. 32nd at KenPom. But the overall resume, obviously strength of record, and wins against bubble isn't going to be as good in the A10. But this is one of those scenarios where the bubble is so bad this year. I would like to see a VCU get in instead of a Texas, maybe even a Wake Forest, because I think VCU can win a game in March Madness. I don't know if Wake Forest can win a game in March Madness. I don't think Texas can win a game in March Madness. SMU. Probably not either. Indiana, I don't know why we should believe anything that they do, except they did just win at Michigan State with a genius zone call. But VCU, I would love to see them in the tournament, get them in, but these metrics are so heavily weighted on strength of schedule and who you play and how much you beat them by, and they don't play anyone being in the A10. But that's the problem with mid majors. Next four out, we won't go through these as long. Xavier as your fifth overall team out, North Carolina as your sixth overall team out, USC as your seventh overall team out, and Kansas State into the conversation with just one of the biggest question marks around them, because they're playing like pretty much like a 2 or 3 seed right now. That's how good they've been playing as of late, but they were so bad to start the season. So how much recency bias will there be? Do they say right now I want to put in the best teams in the bracket, and they put Kansas State? Because you put Kansas State and Texas on a neutral right now, Kansas State's probably favored by 7.5, 8 points. They're playing that good, but 7-11 start. You can't ignore that. And then in the up next, so your 9th through 12th teams out: San Francisco, UCF, Cincinnati, UC Irvine. Kind of some long shots there. Maybe San Francisco. They got a big opportunity tonight at Gonzaga, which you'll know what the result is before we do right now. So that is your entire bubble watch. So let's go back to the main graphic. As mentioned, let's just go through these again. San Diego State is an 11 seed. Georgia taking on BYU. So Arkansas was ahead of BYU, but you don't want SEC playing SEC, Arkansas and Georgia. So Arkansas moves to the other one to play Wake Forest, and Drake as your automatic qualifier out of the Missouri Valley. 12 seeds, UC San Diego as your first 12 seed out of the Big West. We mentioned George Mason out of the A10, Yale out of the Ivy, and McNeese out of the Southland. 13 seeds, Arkansas State out of the Sun Belt. Akron with the largest winning streak in the country out of the MAC. High Point in there. I would not want to play High Point. I will say that every single episode. I would not want to play High Point if I'm a 4 seed. Chattanooga as your next 13 seed, moving in there, replacing Samford. They are now in first. 14 seeds, Lipscomb as your first 14 seed, Northern Colorado as your second, Utah Valley out of the WAC, not Grand Canyon. Utah Valley's in first right now. And then Jacksonville State, your 15 seeds, Towson. Towson does not scream 15 seed to me. They scream 14 or 13 seed, but as we say, this is what would happen if all the favorites win, which we know is not going to happen. Say, for example, Buffalo wins the MAC somehow, then Towson would be ahead of Buffalo, so they'd move up to that 14 seed. Bryant winning the what conference is Bryant in? I can't even remember. Mind is spiraling. Cleveland State winning the Horizon. What conference is Bryant in? Why is this not popping into my head? Anyways, 15 seeds, Cleveland State as the automatic qualifier out of the Horizon. Then Central Connecticut State, kind of putting in some work this year for such a horrible conference. This is a team that just kind of has that something about them, has that Fairleigh Dickinson about them, where they could really make some people frustrated come March. Now, they could also lose by 60. Bryant's in the America East. Sorry, that's why I'm stuttering. I couldn't think about it. They're in the America East. Central Connecticut State, though, I see a little something with this team. I can't explain it because they're not great, but I see a little something with this team, some potential. 16 seeds, Omaha out of the Summit League, Merrimack. And in the first 4 games, you got Norfolk State taking on Southern and SEMO taking on American in that final 16-seeded game. That is the entire bracketology. That was a lot of talking. Hopefully you stuck with me there through that entire process. Now let's do a few game previews. So on Friday, as mentioned, this will release on Friday. UCLA plays at Indiana. This is a pretty big one. UCLA 6 seed, Indiana 3rd team out. So pretty big one for both teams. UCLA is favored by 1 even on the road. Now Saturday, this is the day we got to talk about. I mean, it is just absolutely loaded. So the most important thing on Saturday, I know there's number 1 versus number 2. The committee will be releasing, just like the college football playoff does, the committee will be releasing their top 4 seeds, the top 16 overall seeds at that point. So stay tuned to our Instagram. We'll post about all of that, and our Twitter and TikTok will post about that when it's released. We'll post our prediction right before it, and I think last year we missed 2 or something. So it's usually, bracketologists know pretty much what they're doing. So this should be that's a must-watch thing, 12:30 on CBS. But the game of the day is at 4 o'clock on ESPN. Number 1, Auburn travels to number 2, Alabama. The biggest game of the year. Not just your top 2 teams in the AP poll. They're the top 2 teams in bracketology right now. They're your top 2 seeds. They have the 2 best resumes in the country. Auburn's been the best team in the country so far this year. Alabama was ranked preseason number 2, and they're still number 2. They've lived up to their expectations. It's a rivalry game, one of the biggest rivalries we have in college sports. This is one of the biggest games ever. This probably is the biggest game ever in the state of Alabama for, these respected rivalries. The biggest basketball game? Probably. I mean, Auburn, has made some deep runs. Alabama just made the Final Four last year. This is going to be awesome. Nate Oates versus Bruce Pearl, 2 electrifying offenses. Alabama's number 2 in the country in offensive efficiency. Auburn's number 1. It's going to be a shootout. It's going to be fun. Who's going to win the game? I have no idea. I'd lean Auburn, but Alabama at home, you never know. They just put up 103 at Texas in a trap game. Most teams are looking ahead to Auburn in that one. They just go out and put up 103. Team's really good. They're peaking at this moment in time right now. Other games to know throughout the day. 12 o'clock on ESPN starting off the day. Arkansas travels to number 8, Texas A&M. A&M favored by 8 in that one. At 1 o'clock on CBS following that top 16 reveal. We talked a lot about Wisconsin. Can they back me up? Number 16 Wisconsin goes to number 7 Purdue. Purdue coming off a loss, so rough spot for Wisconsin. Purdue favored by 5 in that one. At 2 o'clock on ESPN, this is your second best game of the day. Number 6 Houston goes to number 13 Arizona. 2 top teams in the Big 12. Houston's in first, Arizona in second. Houston favored by 2 on the road in that one. At 2 o'clock on ESPN2, West Virginia goes to Baylor. Baylor favored by 7 in that one. Reason I put this on the must-watch games is because this kind of just screams, I know they're in the same conference, so it can't happen. Just kind of screams 8-9 game, right? Baylor has the 8 seed, West Virginia has the 9 seed. Feels like a March Madness game. At 6 o'clock on ESPN2, another rivalry game. Number 22, Mississippi State, goes to number 19, Ole Miss. Ole Miss favored by 5 in this one. I think Ole Miss is going to win this basketball game. I think they're better than Mississippi State. At 8 o'clock on Fox, number 11, Michigan State, goes to Illinois. Illinois favored by 4. Michigan State coming off a loss. I think they're overrated. I think Illinois is better. We'll see, though. Coming off a loss, will they be, amped up and ready to go? But they've lost quite a few lately. I think I'll take Illinois in that one. 8 o'clock on ESPN. Number 15, Kentucky travels to Texas. Kentucky only favored by 1 in that one. As mentioned, the computers like Texas, but first team out right now. They need a win. Now let's talk about the under-the-radar games real quick. Vanderbilt goes to number 5, Tennessee. Tennessee coming off a loss. They're favored by 14, my goodness. 3:30 on the SEC Network. Number 21, Missouri goes to Georgia. Georgia needs this one pretty badly. Missouri is favored by 1, even on the road. 4 o'clock on ESPN2. Cincinnati in position to sort of get into position if they go and win this game. At number 10, Iowa State. Iowa State is favored by 12 in this one at home, though. At 6 o'clock on the ACC Network, this is a very, very bubbly game that will fly under the radar. Wake Forest goes to SMU. SMU's favored by 7. Remember we mentioned the computers do not like Wake Forest. I'm not much of a believer in either team, quite frankly, so someone's got to win. 7 feels like a lot of points. I don't know if it'll be that high of a spread. At 8 o'clock on ESPNU, let's talk about some mid-major games. Princeton goes to Yale. These are your top 2 teams in the Ivy League. Yale favored by 9 in this one at home. 8 o'clock on ESPN2, Troy goes to Arkansas State. These are your top 2 teams in the Sun Belt. Arkansas State favored by 5. Love that ESPN is putting these on air. Kansas State goes to BYU. Kansas State, the hottest team in the country. BYU in desperate need of a win. BYU favored by 7. They're not as desperate as they were, I guess, winning at West Virginia. BYU is favored by 7. That game's at 9 o'clock on ESPN+. If you're giving Kansas State 7 points right now, I think I'm taking it and running with it. They're on fire. 10 o'clock on CBS Sports Network, Boise State goes to San Diego State. San Diego State only favored by 3 in this one. Boise State was my preseason pick to win the Mountain West. They haven't been good, but the talent is there, and San Diego State is in desperate need of picking up a win there. Now let's talk about Sunday too, because Sunday is going to be a great day as well. Starting at 1 o'clock on CBS, number 20 Michigan goes to Ohio State. Obviously a huge rivalry game there. Ohio State's favored by 2 at home in that one. At 2 o'clock, let's give some more mid-major love. On ESPN Plus, the MAC, not the Mac, the MAC with 2 A's, MAAC. Marist goes to Merrimack. These are probably your 2 best teams. Throw Quinnipiac in there as well in the MAC, so that'll be a some sort of a matchup. Merrimack is favored by 4 in that one, but for mid-major lovers, go watch that. For mid-major lovers, definitely watch this one. 2 o'clock on ESPN2, Bradley goes to Drake. Top 2 teams in the Missouri Valley. Drake is favored by 7 in that one. Drake got him earlier this year at Bradley. Can they go 2 for 2? We'll see. At 3 o'clock on the Big Ten Network, Nebraska goes to Northwestern. Northwestern not in the tournament conversation. Nebraska is. Tough spot here. Northwestern, tough place to play. At 3 o'clock on FS1, your game of the day, number 24 Creighton goes to number 9 St. John's. Your top 2 teams in the Big East right now. This will have the biggest impact of probably any game this season for the Big East regular season race. 3 o'clock FS1, St. John's favored by 6 in that one at home. 4 o'clock on the CBS Sports Network, your top 2 teams in the Mountain West. We have some good mid-major matchups going. Utah State goes to New Mexico. Remember, New Mexico beat them by 19 at Utah State. Now they get them at home. They are favored by 6 via KenPom. That's a must-watch game. 5 o'clock on FS1, Iowa goes to number 25 Maryland. Iowa just picked up a big win at Rutgers. Maryland just kind of cruising. Maryland's favored by 12 in that one. And finally, at 7 o'clock on FS1, Rutgers goes to Oregon. Oregon favored by 8 in that one. Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper. Should be a lot of fun. That will do it for the show today. Just a little over 47 minutes. Not too long. Hopefully didn't talk a little too much about that bracketology, but hopefully the people like to hear it and discuss some of the numbers that go into it and what the committee will use. Everyone tune in to that committee show, 12:30 CBS. That's a very important release. The bracketologists all over the world will continue to use obviously those top 4 seeds that the committee releases, and it'll kind of change some things in bracketology. But I think we've got a pretty good understanding right now of who the top 4 seeds will be. Be curious to see if it's Marquette, St. John's, or Ole Miss for that last 4 seed, because it's close. This was the hardest bracketology to do all year. Everything is getting close. We are nearing in on March. We're going to talk to you again on Monday at some point, tentatively right now. Might release on Tuesday if we do it Monday night. So everyone enjoy this incredible weekend of college basketball. Stay safe out there. See you later.